Hi friends, during the month of April, we'll be talking about the word humility, putting others first by giving up what you think you deserve. As we've been making our way through the Bible together this year, you may have noticed something that tended to come up a lot. The religious leaders did not like Jesus or his message. They spent months plotting to silence Jesus, but none of their plans had been successful. In fact, Jesus had become more and more popular than ever. One of Jesus' disciples, Judas, went to them with a plan. Judas said he would hand Jesus over for 30 pieces of silver. Now, Jesus is God's son, so he knew everything. That meant he knew what Judas was planning. But he also knew that he had a mission to save the world. In the book of John, we read that the time had come to celebrate the Passover. And Jesus celebrated that with his closest friends. Jesus shared the meal with them, and then he led them out of the city. By this point, Judas had already left and had gone to finish his plan. Jesus knew what was coming, and he wanted to prepare his friends for what would happen next. He told them in John 16, "In a little while, you'll no longer see me. Then after a little while, you'll see me. I came from the Father and I entered the world. Now I'm leaving and I'm going back to the Father." Then Jesus led his disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane. He told them how the next few days was going to go. He told the disciples that they were actually going to turn away from him. In fact, they would deny knowing him. Now, Peter was not with this. He said, "I cannot believe that I would do this." But Jesus told Peter before the rooster crowed, in other words, before the next day, Peter would deny knowing him. Peter insisted that he would never do that, and the other disciples said the same. Eventually, they reached the garden, and Jesus told the disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took with him Peter, James, and John, and Jesus went off to pray. Now, when he came back, Jesus saw that they had, what? Fallen asleep. Instead of praying, he found them sleeping. Now, Jesus had some words for his disciples for sure and couldn't believe that they'd fallen asleep. Then Jesus left the men and he went back and he prayed a second time. After Jesus had finished praying the second time, Jesus returned to his disciples and once again, he found them asleep. So he left them there and he went away again. For a third time, Jesus prayed the same thing, begging for God to take away what was coming and yet sharing his trust in God's plan. Then Jesus went back to his disciples who were, yep, you guessed it, asleep again. There was a large crowd of people who had come and carrying swords and clubs, and the mob was ready to carry Jesus away. The men who arrived with them also was Judas. And as they got near, Peter drew his sword and he cut off one of the priest's ears. The crowd gasped, but Jesus stopped Peter, touched the man's ear, and healed it. I'm sure the crowd probably gasped again. And just like that, things had happened as Judas had planned them. And just like that, things happened just as Jesus knew they would. The mob arrested Jesus and took him away. Jesus' friends, who had promised to stay with him, ran away. Jesus had chosen the path that would bring life for everyone, but it would cost him everything. Judas might have thought that he had his plan set, but it was actually part of God's plan all along. It had always been God's plan to send Jesus to be our Savior. Now the time had come for Jesus to put God's plan into motion. Jesus' followers were amazed. Jesus followed through. He showed the perfect example of humility. He put us first when he died on the cross for our sins. We can follow Jesus' example too. We can choose to put others first. But you and I know that that's not always easy. You and I have to ask Jesus for help, and that's done through prayer. We need to ask God to help us to put others first. Thank you for joining me today, friends. Down below in the description are some activities and fun things for your family, and of course, a word search. I'll see you guys next week.